Galoruharam Gauranga Gudatama Gopyada Kopa Briksham Gopala Gada Ratidam Yati Singaloruharam Gauranga Govinda Deshikavaram Satatam Tama Ajama Kichuna Bachila Dachiya Dileka Kola Kahe Premananda Emona Goranga Hridaya Dariya Bola Bhaja Goranga Kaha Goranga Laha Gorange Re Jai Jana Goranga Bhaje Se Hoyamara Prana Re Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Yashaiva Padambu Jabhakti Labhya Prema Bidana Parama Pumata Tasmai Jagan Mangala Mangalaya Chaitanya Chandraya Namo Namaste Chaitanya Chandraya Namo Namaste Chaitanya Chandraya Namo Namaste Madgavirapi Gopala Sri Kriyat Kripaya Jari Tadaiva Sambhaya Pitva Rishi Yustat Priya Janaha Shri Krishna Krishna Chaitanya Sasanatana Rupaka Gopala Raghunathabda Brajabala Bapahima Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Eva Cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, it's really nice to see everybody here today. I really appreciate you taking part. Good computer. Let's see, I'm just going to drink a little of this real quick and be right with you. Just give me a moment. So we've been discussing about Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's bhajan in the Gambhira. And when you want to speak about the trees in the forest or the plants in the forest, the first thing you may do is understand something about the country and then the climate in a particular place. And then you'll look at the forest from a distance and see the overall look of things. And as you come closer and closer, you'll describe things in more and more detail. So we've been looking at the Gambhira in a allegorical kind of way sometimes, and also just trying to understand the nature of that house and who is Kashi Mishra. I think we discussed that mostly in our last session. I highly recommend that session for anyone who's interested. There were some very fascinating things about Kashi Mishra which came up, which I think you won't find practically anywhere else. And Kashi Mishra's previous lives and where Kashi Mishra went after this life with Mahaprabhu. So Mahaprabhu, he left Nabadwip. And there's a lot of symbolism and a lot of purport to that also. We wrote, many of you are aware, I think, of a magazine that we printed about the secret of Mahaprabhu's sannyas. And we explained something there, the very deep purport of not just Why did he take sannyas? But a bigger question, according to our Gaudiya theology, how could he take sannyas? Because Krishna is controlled by his devotees. He's controlled by the love of his devotees. So the question is not why did he leave his mother, Sachimata, why did he leave Vishnu Priya, but the real question is how could he leave them? So after taking sannyas, he went to Jagannath Puri, and he very quickly went on pilgrimage. And he traveled throughout South India in preaching so much. And then he returned. And when he was in South India, he met many different devotees, some of whom he told to come to Jagannath Puri. So Kaviraj Goswami describes some of these things. And in Chaitanya Charitamrita Madhya Lila chapter 1, Kaviraj Goswami, toward the end of the chapter, he begins to speak about the Anchalila. And his purpose, he expresses, is that he's concerned that he may not live so long to be able to speak all these things. And so he wants to be able to say it now. So I'd like to look at some of those verses because those verses introduce us to the Anchalila. We said something about the physical place of the Gambhira and how what it represents for all of us and how we have to have a Gambhira in our life, how we have to learn to live alone in the crowd, as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu did and taught us in Jagannath Puri at Rath Yatra and having darshan of Jagannath in front of thousands or sometimes millions of devotees. He was alone. And he also physically had some place that he would retire to where he could express himself through his bhajan and spend very intimate, deep time with like-minded associates, in particular Sri Damodar and Roy Ramananda. So now in this session, we want to begin to speak something about the purport of Mahaprabhu's Anchalila. To do that, we're going to have to look back some at the Adi Lila a little, and we're going to have to compare the Nabadwip Lila and the Puri Lila to try to understand what is the purpose of the Puri Lila, what is the purpose of the Anchalila, for which the Gambhira is the stage. So let's go now to a few verses from Kaviraj Goswami's Chaitanya Charitamrita. This is Madhya Lila chapter 1, text 249. Vinabhano hoite jari nila chali aila atara barshatahan vasa kahan nahi gela. So Mahaprabhu went to Vrindavan, but he didn't stay in Vrindavan either. And we spoke sometimes about that. I mentioned a number of times, I don't want to go into it so much again, how Ayendra Prabhu was disagreeing with me about the purpose of Jagannath Puri and Puri Lila. And he commented, he challenged me in a class in Vrindavan, that how the Chaitanya Charitamrita says that when Mahaprabhu left Jagannath Puri to go to Vrindavan, the ecstasy that he experienced immediately was 100 times greater than the ecstasy he experienced in Puri. When he arrived in Mathura, his ecstasy increased another 10,000 times. And when he arrived in Vrindavan, his ecstasy increased another 100,000 times. So Ayendra Prabhu was one of our heroes. He was kind of like, so see, ha. And it was a little bit difficult because he's my Guru Jana, but I just humbly replied to him, okay, but then why did he return to Jagannath Puri? Why didn't he stay in Vrindavan? And why is it that Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, when he speaks about the Mula verse, the Mula shloka of the Chaitanya Charitamrita, he says that Radha Bhava Dyuti Sivalitam Nomi Krishna Sarupam. He speaks about 3 desires that Krishna had, which were not fulfilled in Braj Leela, and for which Krishna came in the mood of Radha, to understand the love of Radha, to understand and see what it is about him that she loves so much, and to experience the happiness, the ecstasy that Srimati Radharani experiences. So that was not possible in Vrindavan. And Kaviraj Goswami says that Mahaprabhu returned to Puri, and it was in Puri, in the Gambhira, that his three desires were fulfilled. So this is a very, very mysterious, a very, very deep, very important subject matter in front of us. So this verse describes Bindavana Haiti Jari Nila Chali Aila, that Mahaprabhu, he came back to Jagannath Puri. Bindavana Haiti, he left Vrindavan. Atara Bharsha Tahanvasa Kahan Nahi Gela. And he stayed there in Jagannath Puri for 18 years. Atara Bharsha. And Kahan Nahi Gela, he didn't go anywhere else. So this is something we should understand about Jagannath Puri. This is a very, very mysterious and deep topic. What is the nature of Jagannath Puri? We've mentioned in a number of our sessions about this, you could call it a formula, 24-6-6-12 of Gaura Lila. The first 24 years he spends as a grihastha in Nabadwip, and the following 6 years he travels as sannyasi. And then the following 18 years, 6 and 12, he spends in Jagannath Puri. The first 6 years, training up his intimate disciples, his intimate followers, his lieutenants who are going to take on the Sankirtan movement, empowering Rupa Goswami and Sanatana Goswami, sending Nityananda Prabhu away to preach, empowering the devotees to preach, giving them the basis of our movement. At that time, he gives the Shikshastakam prayers. And then the final 12 years of his life, he shows, he lives what he's speaking, and he locks himself up in the Gambhira and doesn't see anyone. So let's go back to Chaitanya Charitamrita. The following verses come after the one we just read. Prativarsha Aishi Natahan Godira Bhakta Gan Charimasa Rahi Prabhu Shange Shamilan. That during that time, during those 18 years, the Goda Bhakta Gana, Charimasa Rahi Prabhu Shange Shamilan, they would meet with Chaitanya Mahaprabhu for 4 months during the Chaturmasya period. They would come every year to Jagannath Puri. To this day, in Jagannath Puri, trying to think, probably right about this time, maybe a week before now, there's a festival which takes place traditionally at the, part of it takes place at the Jagannath Vallabha Gardens, and part of it takes place in the Gambhira. And it's a festival called the Odia Milan. Here the word you use is Sammilan. Sammilan, Milan means union or meeting. Sammilan means a complete union, where they're meeting in a very deep, intimate way. So this festival is there to this day in Jagannath Puri. And if you're on Facebook or something, I noticed just the last few days that there's 2 or 3 of my friends who are now in Jagannath Puri who are not usually there, and they're going different places. And this is the time of year that the Gaudiya devotees, the devotees from Gaudiya Desh, traditionally come to Jagannath Puri, and there would be a meeting every year in Jagannath Vallabha Gardens, and to this day they have a festival, the Gaudiya Odia Milan, where the Gaudiyas come and they meet with the Odia devotees, and they have kirtan, katha, and prasadam, and loving exchanges and things, because that's the nature of Jagannath Puri. Jagannath Puri is kind of an outpost. The permanent places generally are Nabadwip and Vrindavan. And devotees come to Jagannath Puri in particular to do bhajan. As some people say, some Babajis, they have a tradition. They say that you start your bhajan in Nabadwip, then you go to Jagannath Puri. You stay there for some time, then you go to Vrindavan. And you stay there for some time, then you return to Jagannath Puri. And you may stay in Jagannath Puri and never leave again, or you may go from there back to Vrindavan. And that's the general idea. So then Kaviraj Goswami says that Nirantara Nitya Gita Kirtana Vilas Achandali Prema Bhakti Korili Prakash. There in Jagannath Puri, in his Gambhira Lila, He's speaking about this Anjalila. Nirantara Nritya Gita Kirtan Vilas, constantly, non-stop. Mahaprabhu was dancing and singing and enjoying Kirtan Vilas. The pastimes, Prabhupada says, of Sankirtan. Chandali Prema Bhakti Koile Prakash, and he manifested Prema Bhakti, which he gave even to the Chandalas, the most fallen persons. And then Kaviraj Goswami describes some of the devotees who were with him at that time. And this is going to be our main subject today. Pandita Goshai Kaila Nila Chale Basa Vakrishara Damodara Shankara Haridasa. So there with Mahaprabhu in Jagannath Puri were Pandit Goshai, that's Gadadhar Pandit, Vikeshwar Pandit, Damodar, who is Mahaprabhu's godbrother, Shankar Pandit, and Haridas Thakur. Jagadananda Bhagavan Govinda Kashishwar Paramananda Puri are Swarup Damodar. And he mentions Jagadananda Pandit, Bhagavan, who had some limp, but he was there in many of the pastimes of Mahaprabhu, Mahaprabhu's servant Govinda. Kashishwar Pandit was another very learned associate of Mahaprabhu. Paramananda Puri, who we spoke about in some previous sessions, who's Uddhava in Krishna Lila, and who, according to several different biographies, met with Mahaprabhu in South India. And Mahaprabhu invited him to come to Puri and spend time with him. And according to the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Paramananda Puri initially stayed in the Gambhira. And we heard a little something about that. In our last session, we discussed the kind of the physical characteristics of the Gambhira and how that place is said to have 3 doors. What does that mean? Some Vaishnavas say it means it had 3 walls, which actually makes more sense in different ways. And whether it's 3 doors or 3 walls is really not so important. But we got some impression of the nature of the place and how it was quite a big compound. And there were different rooms. Paramananda Puri was staying in one room. And from the verses in Chaitanya Charitamrita, it's clear that Sri Damodar Goswami was staying in another room. And at least some of the time, his servant, Raghunath Das Goswami, was staying with him. Govinda was staying near the Lord. So these devotees were all staying with Mahaprabhu. And Kaviraj Goswami makes a point out of speaking about them. Chaitya Basi Ramananda Roy Prabriti. And then he speaks about these different devotees who were Chaitya Basis, who were residents of Jagannath Puri. Out of the 4 most intimate associates, or sometimes we say 3.5 most intimate associates, one being Madhavi Devi, who's a lady, and some Vaishnavas say that because she was in the body of a woman, that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu couldn't fully accept her as an associate because he's a sannyasi, so she's considered to be half an associate. It's not that she was a paraplegic and didn't have any legs, or because women are less than everybody else. It's not, doesn't state like that anywhere in any shastras. Every person that we've ever found in the world has a mother, including the Supreme Personality of Godhead when he comes, and mothers are very, very exalted persons. But out of those 4 most intimate associates, who were Ramananda Roy, Sri Damodar, Sikhi Mahiti, and Madhavi Devi, only Sri Damodar Goswami was from West Bengal. And the other 3, Sikhi Mahiti, Roy Ramananda, and Madhavi Devi, who all 3 were related together too, they're all residents of Orissa. So these devotees, Prabhu Sangha e Shabha Koila Nityastiti, they're always remaining with the Lord. This is significant. We want to speak something about the associates of the Lord today. I think in some of our previous sessions, we've also said a little something about this, that whenever the Lord appears, his associates also appear with him. And when the Lord wants to perform some Aishwarya Moya Lila, opulent pastimes, then the gopis of Vrindavan appear as the Lakshmis of Vaikuntha, and the Lord enjoys his Vaikuntha pastimes. When he wants to enjoy some pastimes which are full of opulence but mixed with some Nara Lila. Then he manifests his Ayodhya Lila as Bhagavan Ramachandra, and his associates take the form of monkeys, and they come and they fight on behalf of the Lord. When he wants to enjoy pastimes which are pastimes of Krishna, but Krishna mixed with some opulence, again some opulence and Nara Lila, then Dwarka is manifest. Balaram manifests himself as Dwarka, and we're hearing in our sessions from Lalita Madhav how the gopis directly became, what the Goswami says, a very startling thing, which is not something I want to try to discuss in this session. It's a big, big topic, but he discusses how the gopis directly became the queens. He said previously it was said they were expansions, but now it's said no, they directly became the queens. So they manifested that because there the Lord was helped by them to enjoy his particular pastimes. So Kaviraj Goswami goes on to speak about these associates. This is text 355, not to 356 from Madhya chapter 1. Advaita Nityananda Mukunda Shrivas Vijanidi Vasudeva Murari Jatadas Patibarshi Aisi Sangi Rahi Charimas Tan Sabalana Prabhu Vivida Vilas. He mentions now some other devotees. And whereas previously he uses the phrase Nityastiti, speaking about the devotees of Orissa who were constantly with the Lord, they always stayed with him. These particular devotees, it's a little different. Pratibarshi Aisi Shange, they had 4 months, Charimas, association with the Lord, and they would come during the Chaturmasya period. And Mahaprabhu would do pastimes in their association. These devotees are not just anybody. Advaita Charya, Nityananda Prabhu, Mukunda, Srivas Thakur, Pundrik Vidyanidhi, Vasudev Datta, Murari Datta. These different devotees would come to visit Mahaprabhu and stay for 4 continuous months. So, if you want to try to understand a particular pastime of the Lord, you can do it from different angles, just as we can study the universe in the Bhagavatam from the 5th canto, or you can study it from the 2nd canto. One perspective is looking from the bottom looking up, another perspective is from the top looking down. And it's confusing sometimes when we try to analyze the Bhagavatam with our linear sense of measurement and history and geography. We become very, very confused because the vision is very, very different. So in a similar way, if we want to understand the pastimes of the Lord, we can do it through different perspectives. And one way is to look at the Dham itself. What is that abode like? We can look at Vrindavan, we can look at Ayodhya, we can look at Vaikuntha, we can look at Dwarka and Mathura, and just see the buildings and the kind of pastimes that go on there. And from those things, we can understand something about the Lord himself. Then, of course, we can look at the Lord and his feature. In Vaikuntha, he has 4 arms. In Ayodhya, he manifests a form which causes fear sometimes in the hearts of some of the devotees. In Dwarka, our acharyas say that sometimes he manifests this form of Krishna in Vrindavan, and the devotees see cows. Sanatana Goswami says this in Brihad Bhagavatamrita. That sometimes Krishna manifests a Vrindavan form in Dwarka with cows, and he's playing his flute. Other times, the devotees see him with 4 hands, and they're reciting Purusha Shukta prayers. So what does that tell us? That tells us that it's a place which has some intimacy, but also opulence. And then Mathura is something else, and Vrindavan is something else. So we can look at the place, we can look at the Lord, and how he manifests his form, what he's doing in those places. In Vrindavan, Krishna's not doing Dharma Samstarpana. he's taking care of his devotees. Paritanaya sadhanam vinashayata duskritam. He's taking care of his devotees and he's killing the demons there, but he's not doing this dharma samstarpana, which he does later in Kurukshetra and in Mathura and Dwarka so much. In Vrindavan, he's just enjoying. As what's his devotee's name? I don't recall. There was one, it's on the tip of my tongue, one devotee from Germany who came to India at the time of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, and he took initiation. And later he revealed to Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, he said that I knew that Krishna was God because I examined everybody else. And the God of the Bible, he is throwing thunderbolts, and he's a God of judgment and a God of wisdom and things. He's very busy. And I came to India, and then I visited Ganesh, and I visited Shiva, and I visited Durga. And wherever I went, everybody had some kind of work. They were doing this. And then I came to the temple of Krishna, and he was playing the flute. He was just enjoying. And there's always beautiful ladies. And I knew this must be God. So we can understand something about the Lord by his form, by his pastimes, by the abode, and by his associates. So today, in our session, we're looking ahead to the Ancha Lila through the lens of the Madhya Lila chapter 1, where Kaviraj Goswami, out of concern that he might not live so long, he gives a synopsis quickly of the Ancha Lila. And he gives these verses where he stresses about these associates. And today I want to speak a little something, and some of these things some of you have heard before, but I think it'd be healthy for you to hear again. We want to speak something about the difference between Nabadwip Lila and Jagannath Puri Lila, and how we understand these two different places. Why is it that Kaviraj Goswami speaks about these four intimate associates of the Lord, the most intimate associates, which he says three of them are living a residence of Orissa, only one is from Navadvip, and none of them are a member of the Panchatattva. Whereas we hear about here in this verse, Advaita Nityananda Srivas, he's mentioning different members of the Panchatattva. Out of the 5 members of the Panchatattva, Mahaprabhu himself excluded, so then there's 4 others. Out of those 4 others, only one of them stays always in Jagannath Puri, and that's Gadadhar Pandit. In fact, Gadadhar Pandit takes a vow known as Chaitra Sannyas, meaning I'll never leave this place. And we understand the ontological position of Gadadhar Pandit to be Radha. Now, that's a very, very deep, involved discussion, which I'm not thinking to get into right now in this session, maybe a little bit, about the connection between Gadadhar Pandit, Gadadhar Tattva, and Gora Tattva, and why Gadadhar is staying in Jagannath Puri, why Advaitacharya doesn't, why Nityananda Prabhu doesn't, why Srivas Thakur doesn't, and what is the difference between the Adi Lila in Navadvip and the Ancha Lila in Jagannath Puri. And this is a little bit of a sensitive subject too, because just as I found out when I was giving my class once in Vrindavan, I've told this story many times, so please forgive me if I tell it again, but they asked me to give class during Kartik, and it's a little scary to give class in Vrindavan during Kartik. So I prepared, because there's all kinds of sannyasis there and senior devotees and things. So I prepared carefully for the verse. I showed up about 5 minutes before the class, looked at the board, they had my name written on the board, and they had the verse. And I discovered, much to my horror, that I had prepared for the wrong verse. And there was at least 4 sannyasis there and maybe 6 or 8 Prabhupada disciples and things. So I'm such a rascal. I kind of feigned humility, and I went to Sachinanda Maharaj. I said, Maharaj, I can't speak in front of you. You should give the class. And he said, no, Madhavananda, you should speak. And then I said, Maharaj, to tell you the truth, I prepared for the wrong verse. And then Maharaj doesn't recall saying this to me, but I recall at that time. But anyway, I don't know if he said it or not, but I recall him saying it to me, that he told me at that time, said, anyway, Madhavananda, just say something about Jagannath Puri. So as devotees do sometimes, sometimes I remember hearing a class someone gave about time according to the atom. It's a very technical verse and things, and he read the verse and read the purport, and then he said, "So this is not very interesting. I'm going to tell some stories about Srila Prabhupada." So sometimes devotees in our society they twist things a little bit. I don't think my twist wasn't that radical from time to the atom to Srila Prabhupada, but we spoke something about Jagannath Puri and Vrindavan. And at the end of the class, one wonderful Vaishnava came running in and stuck his hand up, wanting to quarrel with me, and that was Ayendra Prabhu. And I learned at that time a very important lesson, that when we visit different dhams, we have to be very careful and respect the residents there in their particular mood that they have. And certainly Ayendra Prabhu, he's in the Vrindavan, he's in the Braj Bas. And it's really not appropriate to give a class glorifying Jagannath Puri when you're in Mayapur or in Vrindavan. So it's a subject that we should be careful about. So today I'd like to speak a little bit about the difference between some of these. Some of you heard me speak some about this before. Again, I'll repeat some of the things, but I'd like to share a little different perspective than maybe some of you heard me say before. In Nabadwip, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is known as Vishvambar. After he takes sannyas, he's known as Sri Krishna Chaitanya. So what is the difference between these two names? These two names have a deep purport. In the Atharva Veda, there is a definition of the word Vishvambar. Vishvambara Vishvena Ma Bharasa Pahi Swaha. That, my dear Vishvambar, you're the upholder of the universe, you please preserve me. Pahi, you protect me, you sustain me. This is the nature of Vishvambar. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is explained about this in Chaitanya Bhagavat. This Kaviraj Vrindavan Das Thakur in Adikanda chapter 4. He mentions about how Mahaprabhu got the name Vishvambar. There was a Namkaran ceremony for Nimai. Nimai was his Dak Nam. Dak Nam is a cultural kind of thing which is a little difficult to explain unless you spend a lot of time in India. I'll give you a very interesting explanation. We had one local devotee, local man, working for us for several years, and his name was Bideshi. Bideshi means foreigner. But that's what everybody called him, Bideshi. Now, that was not his birth name. That was his Daknam. Daknam, Dak means to call out. Daknam means kind of like the common name or your nickname that you have. And it's an interesting story how he got that name, because he came from a small village, and in his village, he was the first child that was born outside of the village in the hospital. And because he was born outside the village, his Daknam, I don't remember his legal name, we never called him that. His Daknam was Bideshi. And we would always call him Bideshi, although we're Bideshis, we're foreigners, and he's actually a Deshi, a native person. So Mahaprabhu's name at the time of birth, his Daknam was Nimai, because he appeared under a neem tree. But Vrindavan Das Thakur explains how Nimai got the name Vishvambar at the time of his Namkaran, Samskar. Bolene Vidvan Shabakoriya Bichar, Ekanama Jogya Hoy, Tuite Ihar. So many different people came for that Namkaran ceremony. Bolene Vidvan Shabakoriya Bichar. Vidvan Sabha, all the different learned persons came together. In Koriya Bichar, they considered very carefully, Eknam, yoga, what's the most yoga? Yoga means appropriate. What's the most appropriate name to give to this child? Jagat hoila shushta ihan janame, purvejena prithvi dharila narayane. And in their wisdom, these scholars, they describe that, I'm going to read this. I have some notes here. We should read this purport first and then the previous verse. They said that Jagat Hoila Shushta Ihan Janami, just as Lord Narayan previously came and he delivered the Jagat, the universe, Purvijena Prithivi. Prithivi means the earth. Because of that, the earth became Darila, was delivered by him, by Lord Narayan. It became very, very prosperous because of that. So Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati explains that previously when the earth was submerged in the water, Lord Narayan in his incarnation as Varaha delivered and maintained the earth and thus became known as Vishvambar, because he delivered and he maintained the earth. Then again, prior to the incarnation of Hayagriva, the science of the absolute truth was lost to this world, thus the Vedic literature was merged into the water. Lord Hayagriva then killed the material knowledge and natural science of the demons, Madhu and Kaitaba, and this way displayed the glories of the Vedic knowledge. The four Vedas were lost in both cases. And Madhu and Kaitaba came and they were speaking material knowledge instead of transcendental spiritual knowledge. And for this reason, Lord Hayagriva was also known as Vishvambar, because he delivered the universe. Whenever the demigods and human beings are harassed by demons, various incarnations are therefore also known as Vishvambar. Since this boy, they were saying, will also protect and maintain the universe, just like the incarnations of Vishnu, the name Vishvambar is appropriate for him. So they considered in this way, they elected the name Vishvambar for the Lord. Due to his advent and the influence of chanting and hearing the names of Krishna, people who had forgotten their constitutional position and become afflicted with unwanted habits have gotten relief. That is, they become situated in their constitutional position or attain the goal of life. And in the previous verse, Vrindavan Das Thakur said, E sishu jamila mata sarvadeshi deshi dubiksha guchila brishti paila krishake. And they said that since this sishu means a small child, E sishu jamila, since this small child has taken birth, sarvadeshi deshi, all the surrounding provinces and things, durbiksha gucha, brishti means rain. There's been sufficient rain everywhere. There hasn't been any need for anything else. And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta comments here, after careful consideration, the expert learned persons named the child Vishvambar. Since the birth of this child, his mercy has produced rains from the cloud of pure devotional service that is showered on the living entities' hearts, which are compared to the farmer's fields, burning from the threefold miseries. Thus, the seed of devotional service to Krishna is fructified and grown, and the absence of glorification of Lord Krishna has now become completely eradicated. So then, in the couple of verses later, it's mentioned directly about Vishvambar. Ataiva ihan Shri Vishvambaranam. Therefore, this child, Shri Vishvambaranam, he should be given the name Vishvambar. Kuladipa Kositeo Likila ihan. This name is also written, Likila, in his horoscope. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta says a similar thing. Kaviraj Goswami in Chaitanya Charitamrita says a similar thing in Adi Lila chapter 3. Pratam Lila, that in his initial pastimes, Chandra Vishvambaranam, in his first pastimes, his early Adi Lila, he's known as Vishvambar. Bhakti Rashi Bharila Dharila Bhuta Gram. Because he's saving everyone in this material world. He's doing his Dharila pastime. He's saving everyone. He's filling the universe with Bhakti Ras, Bhuta Gram, Dharila Bhuta Gram. He's saving all the living entities in the universe. In the next verse, Kaviraj Goswami says, Dubran Dhatara Artha Poshana Dharana. That there's this, there's a bij dhatu for this word Vishvambar. The bij dhatu of that word is Poshana and Dharana, the same words that he's doing. He's maintaining and he's nourishing. This is the meaning of Vishvambar Lila. Pushila Dharila Prema Diya Tribhuvan. And how is he doing that? He's doing that by giving Krishna Prem. So he's known as Vishvambar. Kaviraj Goswami later, the next verse describes Sesha Lilaya Dari. Now we're speaking about the Amcha Lila. Sesha Lila Dari. Dari means to carry or to have. In his Sesha Lila, he has the name Sri Krishna Chaitanya. So in his early Leela, Pratam Leela, Vishwambara Nam, he's known as Vishwambar. But Sesha Leela, he's known as Sri Krishna Chaitanya. Sri Krishna Janaye Sabha Vishwa Kaila Dhanya. And he blesses the whole world by teaching. Janaye means that he's teaching by his own personal example. And he's making the whole world Dhanya. Dhanya means to be wealthy. Dhanya means to good fortune. Dhanya means some good fortune. He's giving good fortune to the universe by setting an example. Because in his later Leela, he is Sri Krishna Chaitanya. Shri indicates Madanakya Mahabhava Moyi Radha. Sarva Ankshani Radha. Shri means Lakshmi Devi. Shri means that personality who's the source of Lakshmi Devi, who's Srimati Radharani. And as now Radharani is coming, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is coming, in what mood? He's Krishna Chaitanya. Chaitanya means consciousness. It's still to this day a commonly used word in Bengali. It also is used sometimes, it means science in Bengali and Oriya language. It's a science. So someone who knows the science of Krishna, or here someone who's conscious always of Krishna, that Shri, who's endowed with Shri, that when Krishna himself comes endowed with Shri and is conscious, Chaitanya, of himself, Krishna, that's the Ancha Leela of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And that's the difference between the Adi Leela and the Ancha Leela. That's the difference between his pastimes of Nabadwip, by which he's nourishing the world. And he's maintaining the whole universe. But his later pastimes, those previous pastimes are known as Gona. They're secondary. And I've expressed this before, but Danadhar Maharaj makes this comment very beautifully, that when we say Gona and we translate the word Gona to mean secondary, we're not very happy with that translation. Because when we say secondary, it means something which is not really, it's not primary. It's not so important. It's secondary, Prabhu. My primary purpose is this other thing. But that doesn't really give a proper understanding of that word. Mukhya and Gona. But his Mukhya purpose, his primary purpose is for himself. And his primary purpose is to come as Sri Krishna Chaitanya. And that's his Ancha Leela. Whereas his external purpose, his purpose for other persons, to perform the Yuga Dharma, to give the chanting of the holy name. And Kaviraj Goswami describes this in Adi Leela chapter 3 and 4 of Chaitanya Charitamrita, that his Gona Hetu, his secondary or external purpose, was to give Raganuga Bhakti, to give Krishna Prem to everyone. But his primary purpose happens in the Gambhira. To even understand his Gona Hetu, so we might call his secondary purpose, is a very, very difficult thing to understand. To understand Raganuga Bhakti, to understand Braj Bhav. But who can even begin to understand then the Gambhira Leela? And we see, even amongst Gaudiya Vaishnavas, not to minimize anyone, all the Vaishnavas are very wonderful, and all the Vaishnavas naturally have their own particular proclivity, their own particular form of the Lord, and particular dham which they're dedicated to, which the Lord manifests in their heart and gives them some opportunity to render service, to render bhajan to that particular place. And we respect all of those. And not in this session, but I can bring this out later probably. Srila Prabhupada in one purport, he notes, he says, these three places are non-different. Vrindavan Dham, Mayapur Dham, and Jagannath Puri Dham. We don't see any difference between them. But Sachimata, she gives a small indication. She gives a hint. She says that Nilachale Nabadwipe Jai Duigar. that Jagannath Puri and Nabadwip are two rooms in the same house. So it's the same house. Here, Krishna Kund and I now were staying at the mercy of Tri Yuga Prabhu, our good friend here in Budapest. They kindly let us use their house, their flat. In this flat, there's different rooms. I'm sitting in the living room area right now. There's also a kitchen area. There's also a temple room. There's also a bathroom. Each one of the rooms is the same house, but each room has a different function within the same house. And this is something we spoke about many times. I want to remind those of you who've heard me speak about this before, because it's a very important consideration. It's not that we say, oh, Jagannath Puri is better than Vrindavan, or it's better than Nabadwip. What we say is Aradhya Bhagavan Bhajay Satanayas Tadama Vrindavanam. That Vrindavan Dham is the topmost abode. But we see Vrindavan in Jagannath Puri. We see Vrindavan in Nabadwip. They're different rooms in the same house. And Srila Prabhupada, in one purport in Madhya Lila Chaitanya Charitamrita, he says that these three places are non-different. But how are they non-different? We go to Jagannath Puri and the devotees like to take bath in the ocean. You don't take bath in the ocean in Vrindavan or in Mayapur. In Mayapur, you go and you jump into the Ganga, and it's a very, very humid place. But in Vrindavan, it gets very, very cold in the wintertime. And there's Govardhan Hill, there's some hills and mountains and things there. We don't find that in Nabadwip. These places are different physically, they're different externally, but they're non-different in that all three of them are chambers of Vrindavan. But if we say that they're chambers of Vrindavan, that's not sufficient for us. We want to go a little deeper. Therefore, Kaviraj Goswami in Adi Lila, in chapter 3, where he's laying the foundation for Chaitanya Charitamrita, he says, Pratam Lila Tana Vishwambaranam. In the early pastimes, the Adi Lila, Mahaprabhu is Vishwambar, because he maintains the universe. Sesha Lila Dharinama Sri Krishna Chaitanya. In his Sesha Lila, in his Ancha Lila, he's Sri Krishna Chaitanya. So, in our Gora Gayatri mantra, for those of you who have second initiation, we meditate on Mahaprabhu, who's Vishvambaraya Dhimahi. We think about him. Uttanno Gura Prachodya. We get inspiration from him, thinking about how he's Vishvambar. How is he Vishvambar? He's Vishvambar because he's maintaining the universe. And he's maintaining the universe because he's giving Krishna prema. In Kaviraj Goswami, there's a verse in Adilu chapter 3, which doesn't come to my mind. The Brahmas used to often quote it, where he says that without this prema, the universe cannot be maintained. This prema maintains the universe. Without this Krishna prema, there's no meaning to the universe. And therefore, we worship Mahaprabhu with this Gora Gayatri. Now, when Kaviraj Goswami speaks about these two divisions, he speaks about the difference in name, Pratama Lilaya, Tana Vishwambaranam. In the beginning, in the Adi Lila, he's Vishwambar. Sesha Lila, Dharinama, Sri Krishna Chaitanya. In his Sesha Lila and his Gambhira Lila, he's Sri Krishna Chaitanya. That's one difference that Kaviraj Goswami clearly indicates to us. But he also gives another indication in Madhya Lila chapter 1, which we were just reading. Let's go back and contemplate that. He mentions the Chaitra-basis, the devotees who always stay in Jagannath Puri, and in particular he mentions Ramananda Roy, Subdamata Goswami, Paramananda Puri, and a few other devotees who he mentions as being Nitya Sthiti, who are always remaining permanently with the Lord in Jagannath Puri. And then in text 355 to 356, he mentions some of the most important devotees in Gaura Lila, Advaita Nityananda Srivas, Vasudev Dutt, and others. And he says these devotees, they would come sometimes. They used to visit Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. They would come Rahichari Mas. They would stay for 4 months. And they would help nourish the Lord's pastimes in a particular way, but they weren't the permanent residents. So, as we mentioned in the beginning of our discussion, I'm trying to go a little slow because each one of these points has a very deep purport, and we could really unpack each one of them at length. And I'm trying to just give it in a basic sutra kind of way. As we mentioned in the beginning, if we want to try to understand a particular manifestation of Bhagavan, of the Lord, we can do so by looking in different ways. Where he stays, what he does, what kind of form he manifests, what kind of pastimes he manifests, and the associates that he comes with. So at this point, I'd like to look back at one of our favorite articles, which we've quoted many, many times in many of our sessions. I can't quote it too often. I think it's one of the most brilliant works of transcendental genius ever written. And that's no exaggeration. This is titled The Associates of Sri Chaitanya. It's an article Shiva Bhaktisiddhanta wrote, which is found in the Gaudiya magazine. And he begins by explaining in this one sentence, a very powerful thing. The associates of Sri Krishna Chaitanya are constituents of himself. So now we want to analyze something about, we're trying to analyze Gambhira Lila. And we're trying to understand what is different about Gambhira Lila from Nabadwip Lila. If we speak about our life, if we want to write a book about Bana Biharani, we may divide the book into different divisions. And when Bana Biharani, she was living in Florida, and she was like this. And Bana Biharani, when she was living in Michigan, she was like this. And when she stayed in Jagannath Puri, she was like this. You may divide it according to where she was staying at different times. So to understand where she's at today, it's necessary to look also in her past and see the previous places where she was staying. So similarly with Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, if we want to understand his Ancha Lila, his Gambhira Lila, and the purpose of it, we also have to understand the purpose of his Adi Lila and his Nabadwip Lila, and where and how that fits in. So the first sentence is so deep. The associates of Sri Krishna Chaitanya are constituents of himself. They're parts of himself. It's our object in this short paper to study the implications of these doctrines. Sri Krishna's active existence, it's active, it's not passive, involves the undivided operation of the following 6 divine entities. Here he's speaking about the first verse of the Chaitanya Charitamrita, where the Kaviraj Goswami explains how the Lord manifests in 6 features, which are the Panchatattva and Guru. So they're undivided. You can't divide these things. They're one, and they're operating together. The gurus, the devotees, the avatars, the divine manifestations, divine powers, and God himself. All of these are jointly and severally divine. They're jointly divine, but they're also divine in a separate way. As Sri Krishna Chaitanya is identical as Sri Krishna, the active existence of Sri Chaitanya also implies the cooperation of the above 6 divine categories. It's not technical yet. It's going to get a little technical coming. When Sri Krishna Chaitanya was pleased to manifest his appearance on this mundane plane, all the 6 constituents of himself also necessarily, it's necessary. He cannot manifest himself completely unless all 6 constituents of himself come. This is Panchatattva and Guru. It's necessary. They made their appearance as part and parcel of himself. The appearance of Godhead in this world implies the co-appearance of all his divine paraphernalia. Srila Prabhupada in one lecture in Nectar Devotion in Vrindavan in 1973 4, I think it was. He said that just as the king, when the king comes, it implies the servants of the king, it implies the minister, it implies the guards, it implies the army, it implies the cooks. The king doesn't come by himself. And similarly, Krishna, when he comes, he doesn't come alone. So Srila Prabhupada says, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta is saying, the appearance of Godhead in this world implies the co-appearance of all his divine paraphernalia. Godhead must not be conceived as in any way separable from his entourage. Don't think he's separate from his entourage. Godhead shorn, when you cut someone's hair, you shear off their hair. Godhead shorn of any of his paraphernalia is a delusion. If you try to have Krishna separate from his devotees, if you try to have Chaitanya Mahaprabhu separate from the other members of the Panchatattva, if you try to have Srila Prabhupada separate from Prabhupada's disciples, if you try to have your Gurudev separate from any of his followers, it's just a delusion. In the same way, the appearance of the divine paraphernalia involves the appearance of the divinity. When Prahlad Maharaj appeared, it indicated the appearance of Lord Nrsingadev. When Srila Prabhupada came to America, it indicated that Krishna was coming. When the devotee comes, then Krishna comes shortly after. When Advaita Acharya appeared and manifested his pastimes in Nabadwip, with the devotees doing kirtan and praying for the Lord to appear, it indicated that the Lord was going to appear. The two are distinct yet inseparable forms of the one supreme. Sri Krishna Chaitanya is a divine personality himself. His associates share his divine nature. Sri Krishna Chaitanya is an extended subject. He's not a limited subject, he's an extended subject. All the 6 divine forms have to be worshipped if it is the intention to worship Sri Chaitanya. The Guru is one of his constituents. It is necessary to receive initiation from him. It is also necessary to be instructed by him. As teacher, the Guru has 2 forms. He guides from within. He also appears as a guide and instructor, existing outside his disciples. This is the Chaitra Guru in the heart, and the Diksha Guru and the Siksha Guru outside. Initiation is received from one person only. Instructions may be had from many gurus. Sri Kaviraj Goswami himself was instructed by the famous 6 Goswamis. And then he goes on to speak something about Guru Tattva. I'm going to stop at that point from that article. And I want to examine some of the ramifications of this in light of what we're speaking today. So in Adi Leela, in his early Leela, his Pratham Leela, Tanra Vishwambara Nam, he's known as Vishwambar because he's doing this for others. He's establishing a Yuga Dharma. But then he says, Sesha Leela Adari Nama Shri Krishna Chaitanya. In his Amcha Leela, he's manifesting his pastimes of Sri Krishna Chaitanya. And in Madhya Leela chapter 1, when he speaks about this Amcha Leela, he discusses about how the Lord came and how the Lord was performing Sankirtan and how he stayed in Jagannath Puri for 18 years. And then he speaks about how the devotees were coming and how there's 2 different categories of devotees. And if you think about these 2 categories, one is a category from the Adi Leela, from the Pratham Leela, from Nabadwip Leela. And these are the devotees like Advaita, Nityananda, Mukund, and Srivas, and others who are coming and spending a little time in Jagannath Puri every year. But in contrast, he clearly mentions that there's some other devotees who are Chaitravasis, Sri Damodar, Ramananda Roy, Paramananda Puri, Jagadananda Pandit. And these devotees are Nitya Sthiti. These devotees are staying permanently with the Lord. So we want to understand something. Our purpose is trying to understand the mystery of Mahaprabhu's Gambhira bhajan. So we spoke something previously about the place. It was a place of Kashi Misha, physically, what was it like? Now we're speaking something about who is present. And this is very, very important. Because when we speak about the Lord, his manifestation, we also speak about his powers, the devotees himself, his entourage. And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta says you can't separate the two from each other. That Mahaprabhu is an extended subject. So if we want to understand Mahaprabhu's Gambhira Lila as compared to his Adi Lila or his Nabadwip Lila, we have to understand something about the associates. I'm just going to go over this a little briefly from here on and mention some things which all of you know pretty much. That who is he associating with in Adi Lila? Who are the most important devotees there? Sachimata is the most important devotee. Because as I often say, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is not a brahmachari, he's a mamachari. He's attached to his mother. And Sachimata is so important. And he's also a married man. And Vishnupriya is also a very important devotee there. And he's maintaining this household ashram there and giving so much happiness to the devotees. And when we think about Gaura Lila, when we worship Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in the form of the deity, we worship him in that grihastha ashram. We don't like to think of him with a shaved head, laying on the floor with no bed, and eating very little food, and doing all kinds of austerities as a sannyasi. It causes pain in the heart of the devotees. We want to think of him with his mother. We want to think of him with Vishnupriya. We want to think of him with Nityananda Prabhu or with Gadadhar in his Nabadwip Lila. But that Nabadwip Lila is Vishrambar Lila. That's the pastime where he's maintaining the universe, and that's his gona hetu, or his secondary purpose in coming, to give that yuga dharma. But his primary purpose is in his Anchalila, and that's to taste the mood of Radharani. So in Kaviraj Goswami's Madhya Lila chapter 8, he speaks about the conversation between Ramananda Roy and and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the Godavari River. And Ramananda Roy tells Mahaprabhu so many different things. Mahaprabhu was asking him what is the highest thing, and he first of all tells him what's Vanashram. And Mahaprabhu says, Eho Bhaya, this is external. Agi kaha ar, can you say something more? And then he speaks something more. He finally says about Sarvadharmam Parityaga. Mahaprabhu says, that's also okay, but can you say something more? And finally he begins to speak about Braj Bhav. And Mahaprabhu says, this is nice. Can you say something more about this? And then he begins to speak about Sakya Ras and Vatsalya Priti. And finally he begins to speak about the gopis. And it's in text 202 of Madhya Lila chapter 8 where he says this. Shabi eka shaki ghanya ihan adikar shaki hoite hoy e lila bishtar. From the gopis, he says that it's only the gopis who have the adhikar, the qualification to understand the pastimes of Radha and Krishna. And it's only from the gopis, Saki hoiti hoy, a lilar bishtar, that this bishtar, this pastimes are expanded, because those gopis are the real preachers. Nikunja Yuno Rati Keli Siddhyai. They understand the pastimes of Radha and Krishna. They can expand those pastimes of Radha and Krishna. Kaviraj Goswami goes on. Shaki Bina, without those Shakis, without those gopis, a Lila Pusha Nai Hoy, those pastimes won't be nourished. Shaki Lila Bishariya Shaki Ashvadoy. And then he says again, he uses the word Bishariya, that by the gopis they can expand it. But he says, Shaki Ashvadoy, it's also only the gopis who can taste it. Who's speaking this? This is Ramananda Roy, who's Vishaka Shaki, telling Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who's Krishna. Krishna wants to understand the mood of Radha. And Ramananda Roy is prepping him. Just like when you go to the university and you study with one of your friends who's been already in the same class longer than you, 1 or 2 years longer or something. Please help me understand this. So Ramananda Roy is telling him that you cannot understand this, Krishna, unless you take help from the gopis. Because the gopis are the only ones, Saki Lila Bishariya Saki Ashudoy, it's only those gopis who can expand those pastimes, because they're living those pastimes, and it's only those gopis who can taste those pastimes. And to expand that a little more, if you want to taste these pastimes, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, excuse me, I have a cold here. He says, if you want to understand these pastimes, if you want to expand them, if you want to taste them, then you have to do it through the gopis. In Nabadwip Lila, it's with your mother. It's with Vishnu Priya, who's Bhudevi, the earth goddess. But his primary associates in the Gambhira are Ramananda Roy and Sri Damodar Goswami, Lalita and Vishaka. And it's only through their mercy that he can expand those pastimes and taste those pastimes. When devotees ask us, what is the difference between the Nabadwip Lila and the Braj Lila, we point out that Bhaktivinoda Thakur has given us his Navadvip Dham Mahatmya. And in his Navadvip Dham Mahatmya, he's explained that Navadvip is none different from Vrindavan. As we said, 3 rooms in the same house. And in Navadvip, there's Radhakund, there's Shamakund. You can go to the Chaitanya Mutt there in Mayapur, and there's Radhakund and Shamakund and Govardhan Hill are there. And we know that Srivas Anga, Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, is the Rasa Stali. That's the place of the Rasa Lila. The Rasa Lila takes place practically every night in Vrindavan. And Krishna goes out with the gopis late at night, and that's called Rasa Lila. Sometimes they're dancing, sometimes just in a meeting, but in general, that category of pastimes is called Rasa Lila. The same time of day, the same evening time that Krishna is going and dancing and singing with the gopis, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is going to the house of Srivas Thakur and doing kirtan and singing and dancing. That's none different from the Rasa Stali. But for Gaudiya Vaishnavas, it's so important to understand the subtle differences of different places. And when we speak about the Rasa Stali, there's different Rasa Stalis. Shriman Rasa Rasadam Vivam Sivanta Tastitaha. We have this prana mantra for Gopinath, that at the place known as Vangsivat, he was doing a Rasa Lila. And that place is still there today, near the Jamuna and Gopishwar Mahadev Mandir in Vrindavan. But there's also other Rasa Stalis. I know Vanabiharnya, you were with us, and we went to Chandra Sarovar, to Govardhan, and that's another Rasa Stali. And we spoke something at that time about the difference between these 2 Rasa Stalis. What is the difference? There's some difference. Difference is that the first is known as Panchayati Ras. In every village is a village Panchayat. In our ISKCON, we call it, Istagosi. Istagosi is when everybody's welcome to come. Just like in Mayapur, there was some scandals recently, so they invited everybody to come. We're going to have a big community discussion. And they said, everybody's welcome to say something. That's Istagosi. That's Panchayati. In the village Panchayat, everybody's welcome. Everybody has a voice. So that Ras Lila at Vamsivat is Panchayati Ras. And Radharani left that Ras Lila. Why? It wasn't because some people say, that Radharani was upset because Krishna was paying attention to different gopis. Radharani is very happy to see Krishna with different gopis. The real reason Acharyas express is that Radharani thought, what is this? This is like kitchery. If you make kitchery is just whatever is in your refrigerator. You put some rice and some beans, and maybe you have cucumbers, and maybe you have cabbage, and maybe you have potatoes. Who knows what vegetables, who knows what spices. You just kind of throw it all in together. It's just a mixture, a random mixture of a lot of things. That's kitchery. That's Panchayati Ras. And in that Ras Leela, with the Munichari gopis, the Rishichari gopis, the personified Vedas who became gopis, there were many different gopis present there. And Radharani left because she thought, what is this? This is like kitchery. And this is not, Krishna deserves more than just kitchery. If your Gurudev comes and you just make kitchery for him, maybe he likes it because it's healthy. Prabhupada liked kitchery sometimes also. But in general, kitchery is not considered to be the most high-class thing that you make for the deities, you would make for Gurudev. You want to make it, if Radhanath Maharaj comes, you want to make some nice Italian things. He likes Italian or this or that. So Radharani was thinking, what is this? There's so many different gopis here. This is not, the rasa is not very developed. So she left. And later there was a second Ras Leela at Chandra Sarovar, and it was invitation only for the Astasakis and the Astamanjaris, just the most intimate gopis. So that Panchayati Ras is there at Vamsivat. Now, understanding this distinction between these two Rasastalis, our next question comes now. Let's apply this to the Rasastali in Nabadwip, which is Srivasanga, and the Rasastali in Jagannath Puri, which is the Gambhira. Who's present? Because we can understand something about the Rasastali by who's present there. In the Rasastali at Srivasanga is Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's mother. She was coming every night for those kirtans. It was in the house of Srivas Thakur, who's Narad Muni. Advaita Chari, who's Mahavishnu avatar, was coming every day. Haridas Thakur was coming every day. He's the incarnation of Lord Brahma. There are so many devotees. It's Maha Panchayati Ras. In the Panchayati Ras in Vrindavan, we never hear about Mother Yashoda coming or Lord Brahma coming and singing and dancing with the devotees. But we hear about it in Gaur Leela and Nabadwip. It's Maha Panchayati Ras. But the Gambhira Leela, that's very ekantic. In the Gambhira Leela, we find just Chaitanya Mahaprabhu with the devotees who never left. And therefore, Kabir Goswami says that the Nitya Sthiti, they're the devotees who are always staying there. He makes this distinction. And these are the devotees who are the gopis like Sarup Damodar and Roy Ramananda primarily, and Gadadhar Pandit. Srila Prabhupada writes an interesting purport in Madhya Lila chapter 16. I'll just share this with you, and we're going to go ahead and stop now. I went a little longer than I wanted to. I'm sorry, I wanted to finish this. He says, the eternal Brajbasis, like Sarup Damodar, did not even come to Vrindavan Dham. And he gives a long list. Shri Pundak Vidyanidhi, Shri Haridas Thakur, Srivas Pandit, Shivananda Sain, Shri Ramananda Roy, Shri Sikhi Mahiti, Shri Madhavi Devi, and Shri Gadadhar Pandit Goswami never visited Vrindavan Dham. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur points out that we have no authorized document stating that these exalted personalities visited Vrindavan. But they had some role. Some of the devotees were present, like Haridas Thakur in Navadvip Leela, and then also later in Puri Leela. And some of those devotees, like Sri Damodar, was also a little present. Gadadhar Pandit was present in Navadvip Leela. But his role became much more intimate in Jagannath Puri. Because when Krishna came in the mood of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he came in the mood of Radharani, he needed some instruction. And therefore Ramananda Roy tells Mahaprabhu that it's Gopi Lila Bishchariya, that it's only by the mercy of the gopis that the pastimes of Radha and Krishna can be expanded, and Gopi Asradaya, only the gopis who can taste this thing. So Gadadhar Pandit, who is Radharani, came to help Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And in Jagannath Puri, Gadadhar Pandit was reading Srimad Bhagavatam with Mahaprabhu. He wasn't staying with him. Some Vaishnavas have said that the Gambhira is like a stage, and just as a stage has a curtain, which separates some of the actors who are standing off stage, the Chatak Parva is like a curtain. And on the other side of Chatak Parva curtain, we find Gadadhar Pandit, who Mahaprabhu gave Tota Gopinath to keep him busy. In the same way that you would give a toy to a child to keep the child out of your hair so you can cook the Raj Bhog offering, or you can take care of your other older children. You give a small child some toy. In a similar way, Gadadhar Pandit was given a transcendental toy of Tota Gopinath to keep him busy, because otherwise there may be some rasabas. Because Gadadhar Pandit is Radharani, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is Krishna. If they're too close together, when Mahaprabhu was trying to taste Radha Bhav, then his form of Krishna may come, and Gadadhar may manifest the form of Radha. And then he's not able to taste those feelings of separation of Radha that he came to taste. So he locks himself up in the Gambhira for 18 years with Ramananda Roy and Gadadhar Pandit. So we want to speak about this Gambhira Leela. To understand it, we need to understand something about the physical place, who is in charge there, whose house it was, Kashi Misha, who is Kashi Misha, in Krishna Leela, who is he in Nitya Leela, who is Kashi Misha in his previous life. We spoke about those things. We need to understand something about the physical place, just how many rooms are there, what is it like, what happens there. We spoke about that in our last session. And in this session now, we're coming a little closer and trying to understand in a general way what kind of pastimes happen there in the Antya-lila, and the significance of the particular devotees who are present, and what is the difference between the Adi-lila in Nabadwip and the Antya-lila in the Gambhira. This is our discussion today, so I'm going to go ahead and stop there. Nice light subject matter. I think. Looks like my computer's about ready to die. Let me see if I can do something here with it. Oh, I plugged the wrong cable in. That's why. There we go. So maybe some of the devotees have some reflections or comments or anything. If anybody has to go soon, who's here probably has to go soon. Let me see. Ujjwala Rassi is not here. Anapani Radha, you probably have to go take breakfast with Pranahari Prabhu. Right? You want to go ahead?
We'll accept my humble obeisances, all Vaishnavas, Madam Krishna. I was really, really happy to hear the Katha and this article from Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati about Mahaprabhu as an extended subject is always really joyful to hear and be reminded how all the devotees, it's extended part of Mahaprabhu. So it just reminded me about Radhanath Maharaj, who even offer obeisances to the motorcycle, just, as Krishna's energy. So what to speak of devotees. So, and also was really interesting to hear about the names of Mahaprabhu, the difference, Vishwambar and Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was really, really interesting. And of course, be reminded about this difference of Mahaprabhu's, Krishna's Rasa Lilas in Panchayati and Chandra Sarovar, and how it's applicable to Mahaprabhu's pastime also. So Antya pastimes and first part of his life. So I always remember how I missed that katha because I had a flight on the day was giving this katha that year, and I was like, God. But I'm so happy to hear it, through different kathas again and again. Thank you.
There's a lot of other stories, a few other stories we mentioned there. Bana Bihani can tell you maybe. But you're living it. That's your place now. It's your home. You're a Chandra Sarovar Basi or Govardhan Basi anyway. It reminds you something of it, I think, I hope.
No, thank you.
Is Pranahari there?
Yeah, he's here. He was listening partly. He was doing puja for Giraj, but he's here. Yeah, you want to say something?
Would you like to share anything, Panahari Prabhu? At least I can check and make sure Anapani's not being a pain or anything. She's being okay.
She's doing great. I also really appreciated the Katha, Prabhu. I thought it was fascinating to hear that some of those associates never made it to Vrindavan, Gadadhar Pandit included, or there's no evidence, Srila Prabhupada states that they did. Yeah, I really appreciated how you expounded on the intricacies of the moods of the different time periods of Mahaprabhu's life, and how the associates the place, the Dham, they all correlate with a specific mood. And I also really appreciated hearing about Vishvambar, the name Vishvambar. You sparked my memory. Last night I had a interesting dream about I'll say it because it wasn't so like profoundly spiritual. I'm just happy that it wasn't nonsense. But like, you know how baby Jesus, there's this nativity scene people put up around Christmas time. I had this in a dream with Shachimata and Mahaprabhu, baby Nimai, and Anapani. It was all made of prasadam food stuff, and she wanted to eat it, but I had just decorated the scene. So anyhow, not to distract from the main point, but it was just really nice to hear about Mahaprabhu and his associates today. So thank you so much.
Nice dream. It was very auspicious. It's very auspicious. I'm happy to hear.
I was happy to have it. Yeah.
You know, sometimes devotees, they say, well, Prabhu, maybe you just had too much pizza last night or something, and that's why you had this dream. But the same, it may not be, in one sense, a transcendental dream. I don't know. Maybe it is. But at the same time, it's pretty good to be dreaming about that instead of dreaming about, Woolworths or Sears, Roebucks, or whatever it is, Walmart, or whatever nonsense things are in the world. Thank you very much, Prabhuji. Oh, I know who else may have to go. Brinda Sundari, you're a very busy person. Do you have any reflections, anything? Are you able to come on?
Hare Krishna, thank you for the katha. I think it's amazing that there's a difference between the individuality of each devotee, including all the associates, and especially all the associates, and then also how there's this Krishna is never alone aspect too, that when Lord Chaitanya comes, he always comes with his associates, and they're all individuals. They all have their different perspectives and moods, and sometimes they apparently clash, but they always come together. So I find it fascinating that there's that, I guess I'm sort of relishing too that difference, and how there's so much, because of that individuality and togetherness, there's so much, it creates so much space for relationships, and it creates so much space for the Lord's desire to have interactions and relational interactions with all the devotees, and what they create with that.
That's beautiful. Sometimes we think that diversity is a kind of scary thing. We want to have uniformity. We think uniformity is really good. If everybody wears the same uniform, everybody wears the same shoes, everybody dresses the same, then we show how strong we are, and we're really on the same page, and we all have the same temple president and the same GBC and the same this and that, and we all pledge allegiance to the flag every day. And we think that uniformity is our strength, but actually the uniformity is our weakness, and diversity is our real strength. And we see that that's the Lord himself, his strength literally is his Shaktis. And the Shaktis, Prasya Shakti Vividai Vishruyate, there's unlimited different Shaktis, and they have so many different forms and so many different moods, and so many unlimited different devotees. That's literally that's the strength of the Lord himself. And that's the strength of our movement. But Prabhupada said we should have unity in diversity. And that's the difficult thing. Anyway, that thought came to my mind.
Yeah, and it's funny that it's a difficult thing because, as Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur was explaining, and you speak to it often, how we're actually meant to be an individual, to be alone in the crowd, and to also be in the crowd sometimes. And like, why is it difficult? How come it's difficult? And are we making it more difficult than it has to be? I guess I ask myself that question, like sometimes, like I just recently went to another place where there's a bigger community, and there were 3 swamis there, and they're all gurus, and there's just a big crowd. And I was someone who wasn't, I was from out of town, so people didn't know me, but some people knew me, but they only know me as my title. And so I had this experience of feeling alone, but also feeling like, oh, I'm a part of this big thing, and there's stuff that I don't really relate to. But then I also saw like how amazing and beautiful it was to see all different types of people and how they were working together in certain ways. So I had a realization, I'm making this more difficult than it really needs to be.
Someone wrote me recently about that.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about it, and how part of the problem is that we don't have an identity. We have an identity crisis. And as devotees, we get an identity. I am an ISKCON member. I'm a disciple of XYZ Maharaj. I'm the temple book accountant. I'm the book distributor. I have this identity. But that identity is not deep enough for us sometimes. And then we go some other place, and other people are grabbing onto us, and they're wanting to say, hey, your identity is you're my friend. Or your identity is you're the big person there. You have a social identity, an institutional identity. And we have to learn to be strong in our own personal identity. And one thing I find that's important in this whole Gambhira thing and living alone in the crowd, as you're just mentioning, is that we have to be secure in our own understanding. And that comes with confidence, which in turn comes from having an order from Guru. When Guru Dev tells us, you do this, I want you to do this, then we're very confident. Recently, some big leader in a very public assembly tried to give a big title to me, a big position. And it was nice that he was being so honorific and so affectionate and trusting to me. But it didn't really work with me, because that's not what my Guru Maharaj gave me. And I don't have confidence in that. I don't feel strength in that. But in the order that I've been given, I feel strength and happiness in that. And then when we have that inner conviction, it helps us to deal with other persons. My stepfather was one of my first gurus. He was a very wise person. We used to sit and talk to sometimes 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning about philosophy and yoga and India and things. And really helped me become a devotee. He was an artist and a real philosopher, thinker. And I remember he hated to talk on the telephone. And I remember one time phoning him. I hadn't spoke to my mother or him in like 6 months. I'm a Hare Krishna devotee. I was at a Brahmacharya ashram. I call him from India. It's been 6 months. And he picks up the phone. And he says, hey, it's you. Wow, so good to hear from you. Your mom's right here. And he accomplished something. And I really learned from that. What he did was 2 things at once. He was affectionate with me and loving. And he acknowledged me and made me feel good about myself. Oh, it's so good to hear from you. Your mom's right here. And he took me over right away to her. And I knew he acknowledged, but by being that way with me, he acknowledged our previous relationship. We would sit, once even he told me, he's a sentimental person, but he had some ideas, philosophies. And he said, I think in your past life you were my mother. He said that to me once. It was a little strange. But we had a philosophical relationship. And he liked to talk. And I knew we had this kind of relationship. So when I phone him like that, First thing, hey, how are you doing? It acknowledged that. But he was very short. And I could understand from that also that he wanted his time and that he wasn't satisfied. What he was telling me implicit, I'm not satisfied with having a telephone conversation with you. I knew he would sit down and talk to me till 1 or 2 in the morning if we were together. And he was acknowledging that in a sense, but then just, look, I got to go. And when we have an identity, especially if we have an identity, something with the arts or something with writing, something which is private, people can understand that. Look, I'm really sorry. I know I have so many people. I love you and this and that, but I just had to finish this article. I had to, and when you have that identity, and that's a blessing. I have that personally. I can tell people, look, I'm really sorry. I'm not coming to the temple right now because I have to finish this article. I have to finish the bindu. That's my identity. And that helps me in a social way also. The problem comes when I'm not fixed in my identity and I feel nervous about it. Oh, actually, maybe my identity is I'm their friend. And that's part of my, and I'm failing my identity. But no, my primary identity is a servant of my guru. And they should understand that. And I said, hey, it's so good to see you. I remember seeing one of my godbrothers who, very frankly, is a little crazy and had all kinds of weird ideas and things. And I really didn't get along. But I saw him, hey, how you doing? And I went and I started rubbing his stomach, literally. I said, where's the pizza, man? And I really, we had a nice rasa. And then it lasted about 5 seconds or something. I said, I got to go. Man, it's so good to see you. And he really felt love. I even rubbed his tummy. And then I had to go. I hope, is that helpful something?
Yeah. Having a deeper understanding of one's own purpose.
Yeah.
And identity.
We get confidence with that. You should have so much confidence. You're a mother. And being a mother is a very serious thing. And you have to say, look, I can't come to the class. I can't come to the temple. I have to take care of my kids. And you do that sometimes because that's a very important identity. You're a wife. I have to take care of my husband right now. I have to do this thing. That's part of my identity. So in a similar way, in a devotional way, I have certain services, which is part of my identity. I have a social title, but people should understand I'm not just that title. I'm not just a guy who gives classes and makes terrible jokes and things, but I also have a personal, private kind of thing too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you very much.
We always like your comments. I'm always happy to see someone else taking the burden of doing that management. And there's special mercy. Devotees, we always want to be cannibals and eat alive all the temple presidents and managers because they're all demons and child molesters, or at least potential child molesters and demons. But actually, to take that service is a serious thing. And they're doing it. This is a mother takes care of children. A mother could just say, well, look, I don't want to take care of you guys. You're a pain in the butt. You keep me awake at night. You constantly want to eat. You nag. You complain all the time. Forget it. I'm walking out. And they could do that. But by taking the responsibility of those children, which is a thankless task, and sometimes I remember one little girl when she told her mother, I hate you. I wish you would die. She's a devotee girl also. She's about 6 years old at the time. Her mother really made her mad for some reason. That happens. But the mother still tolerates that and goes on. In the same way, someone's a temple president, or some people just hate you. And you're just the biggest demon, this and that. But if we're mature and I'm doing this not for them or not for myself, but I'm doing this for Prabhupada and for my Guru Maharaj, because this movement it requires this, and it's a sacrifice. I crucified Jesus. I don't think I'll do that with you, Brenda Sundari. I hope not.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that parenting is very, very similar to the management service.
It's thankless. Thank you. I really
Thank you.
And let's see, Natalia, do you want to share anything? Are you there?
Thank you very much. Oh, thank you very much. It was very, very, very interesting, and a lot of topics I discovered. Yes, that okay. I'm thankful for this idea that every devotee is Dhamma-vasi, like belongs to some Dhamma and has some mood and service there, and we should appreciate it and be very attentive. And also, I was thinking when you were reading this article about Panchatattva and Gurus, they are extending Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and I had this analogy also about unity in diversity, and every devotee is very, very important, and this is like example how to behave with all devotees and to see them as particles of God. I discovered that there were two different Rasa Lilas. It is like first time for me I heard about it, and I really appreciate this last talk with Brinda Sundari about like keeping her own identity as servant of Guru.
It's hard sometimes for mothers too, or wives, because if that's the only identity we have, they say, "Who are you?" "Oh, I'm so and so's wife." "Who are you?" I'm so and so's mother. But you're so much more than that. And sometimes devotees don't feel satisfied. They won't feel satisfied. And even being a good mother, a good wife, also you need to be yourself. It wasn't that Vishnu Priya, Mahaprabhu's wife, or Radharani is just a blank slate, and I'm just here for Krishna, and that's all that I do. Radharani's doing so many things. She has her individuality in serving Krishna in a certain way. I was also thinking of your comment, your appreciation about how all the devotees are living in different dhams. Some devotees are living in Goloka Dham in Germany. Some devotees are living in Simachalam in Germany. Some devotees are living, and Prabhupada wanted all these different temples to also be dhams. And Bhaktitirtha Maharaj revealed that by leaving his body in Gita Nagari, that these places are also as good as Vrindavan, as good as Mayapur, Puri, these dhams, because the deities there, the kirtan is there, the devotees are there, and we're basis of that place, and we should identify with that. And then we can really create community. So I thank you for letting me think about it. I was appreciating that. Are we going to see you in Serbia? You decided yet?
I hope so. It just I need tickets. That's why. So I'm waiting for tickets.
We're hoping to see you there. Hare Krishna. And Radhi Shambhu, do you want to share anything?
Hare Krishna. Thank you very much. I've realized that I not only want to listen to you, but I like to listen to the reflections of the devotees who are on this call. They are very nice, actually. Prabhu, I have two questions, though. Maybe you can help because of your deep understanding of Mahaprabhu's pastimes. So you mentioned Prabhupada saying that Vrindavan, Mayapur, Jagannath Puri are the same. Mm-hmm. Right? There are places where Mahaprabhu spent time, like Adikeshava temple, mm-hmm. Where he unearths the Brahma Samhita. How is it that sometimes those sort of temples are not given prominence, in our culture?
Well, there's Kanaik Natashala. There's different places that Mahaprabhu would visit. Also, there's just warm. There's Ramakeli, where Rupa and Sanatan were staying, which is non-different from Vrindavan, that Mahaprabhu visited. But in general, when he went to South India and traveled. He was first of all doing it for a purpose, and his purpose was this Vishwambar Lila, really, to preach. Whereas his purpose in staying in Jagannath Puri was Sri Krishna Chaitanya Lila, was to taste the mood of understanding, being conscious always of Krishna, always thinking of Krishna. So we understand that, but different places he would visit, sometimes little different moods would come out. Sometimes he would remember Vrindavan more. Sometimes he might remember Dwarka more. Sometimes he would remember Lord Shiva. He might remember Ayodhya. He would remember different places, and different moods would come out in him. Broadly speaking, 24/6/6/12, we divide his pastimes in this way. 24 years in Nabadwip, and that's in one sense his primary Leela, in the sense that that's what we meditate on of him, and that's the deity we worship. And then he took sannyas, and as a proper sannyasi, he traveled for 6 years and gave Krishna consciousness to everyone. So when he was in South India, he was in that mood. And in the next 6 years, he took those people he'd been preaching to, like Paramananda Puri and others, and he brought them all together in Jagannath Puri, along with the devotees we're hearing about it coming from Nabadwip, and he would preach to them every year, hear and chant with them, share Hari Katha with them, and empower them for spreading Krishna consciousness. And so that's 6/6. That was 6 years there in Puri. And then the final 12 years, he locked himself up in the Gambhira and just did bhajan for himself. So is that helpful, Prabhuji?
Yeah, that's helpful. Thank you very much. In fact, it brings me then to my next question, if you don't mind. So if Mahaprabhu, for 24 years, he was not a sannyas, and he stayed on the Earth planet for about 42 years. So the majority of his time, he was not sannyas. I'm interested to hear your views. Why was Gadadhar Pandit not a female? Because that opportunity presented itself.
Because Mahaprabhu, Krishna's coming in a male form, and so all those associates came also in male forms. He's experiencing separation. If there were union, then there would be female forms, and they'll all be in Vrindavan. But in separation, it's easier for him. He's doing bhajan with Ramananda Roy, with Gadadhar Pandit, and with others. Is that helpful? And I should also mention that we say that his 24 years as a grihastha are primary. They're primary in the sense that they're the pastimes of the way we worship Mahaprabhu. But they're gona, they're secondary, in the sense that his sannyas lila, his 18 years as a sannyasi, are primary. His 24 years as a sannyasi, I should say, 6/6/12, are primary because there he's tasting Radha Bhav. He's tasting the mood of Srimati Radharani. And that's his primary purpose. But we don't worship him as a sannyasi. I spoke with my Maharaj about this, and he explained that because we don't like to think of him as a sannyasi, we worship him as we don't worship him as Nimai Pandit either, that rascal boy who was always arguing with Gadadhar and Nabadwip and different devotees. But we worship him after he's returned from Gaya. After he's taken initiation, he's begun his Premanam Sankirtan movement in the house of Srivas Thakur. And that's the mood that we worship him in. We want that mercy, and we want to think of him in that way. And we understand his sannyas lila in one sense is primary, because it's for him. And that's the way he was tasting Radha Bhav. And therefore Gadadhar Pandit was necessary. Radharani's coming as Gadadhar to help teach Mahaprabhu. And therefore Gadadhar Pandit, Vrindavan Das Thakur says, is reading Chaitanya Mahaprabhu from primarily from Dhruva Charit and Prahlad Charit. And our acharyas have explained why, if Gadadhar Pandit is Radha, and just like if we were going to do a drama, and some Chaitanya Prabhu wrote a drama about your life, We're going to do a drama about the life of Radhe Shyam Prabhu. So to do that drama really nicely, I might go to you and get some tips. And that's a little problematic, because if I go to you and ask you about some real intimate aspects of your personality, you may say, well, I ask, what is your bhav? You may say, well, I have no bhav, Prabhu. If I want to understand your real intimacy, I need to go to someone like your wife or someone really intimate with you. But also I should speak with you. So Mahaprabhu is hearing from Gadadhar, primarily from Dhruva Charit and Prahlad Charit, not gradually the wide Dhruva Charit and Prahlad Charit, for an external purpose and an internal purpose. Externally to teach that Adavante Chamadye Chahari Savatagiyate, in the beginning, the middle, and the end, Krishna Lila is very sweet. Wherever you dip it, don't just want to jump to the 10th canto. Prahlad in the 4th canto, and in the 7th canto, and Dhruva in the 4th canto, very sweet to hear also. It's an external purpose. To teach us, we should systematically go through Bhagavatam. Internally, Radharani likes to hear about Dhruva and Prahlad, because Dhruva and Prahlad face lots of obstacles. And Radharani, she's staying with Jatila and Kutila. She's so-called married to Abhimanyu. And she has so many obstacles to come to Krishna, so she relates to that. So Gadadhar, as I mentioned before also, when Mahaprabhu starts tasting very ekantic Radha Bhav, then Gadadhar is not present there. Gadadhar is in Tota Gopinath temple. But present are Sri Damodar and Roy Ramananda, because if I want to understand your mood, I'll ask some things about you, but there's some things that even you don't understand. Your wife will understand better. Your mother, or someone who's really, really intimate with you. Sometimes they know you better than yourself in some ways. At least they can explain it better. So that's Lalita and Vishaka Sakis. They know Radharani better than Radha herself. And so when Krishna wants to taste Radha Bhav, he takes their help in the form of Sri Damodar and Roy Ramananda. Is that helpful?
Very nice. Thank you. I appreciate that answer very much. And then lastly, Prabhu, maybe just to tell you, since you spoke of honorary titles that were bestowed on you, today Mukunda Prabhu, who's on this call, he sort of represented you at our temple today. I thought I was listening to you as he spoke on the Dham. So it was very nice. Thank you very much.
I hope the devotees didn't get angry with him or throw rocks at him.
No, it was excellent, actually.
They did try and throw things at me.
As soon as you say my name, that's what happens. People get angry. You have to be careful. Hare Krishna. Thank you, Radhe Shyam Prabhu. Rajabanita, are you there?
Yes, I'm here, but I'm not at home, so I wouldn't open the camera.
Okay.
And I actually thank you very much for Katha. It was a little not fit me because it's too high for me. And but I have nothing to add actually. I just was listening. Few things I didn't understand, maybe more than few. That's all, but thank you very much.
But that's good. Thank you for listening. You know, when you first want to understand mathematics and somebody says, you know, you should study trigonometry and geometry or algebra, you don't understand trigonometry, but you have to understand something in general that trigonometry exists. I can't even tell you what trigonometry is, but I know it exists. My father was a math teacher. I'm terrible with math. But at least we should know something like that exists. So Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, once at Radhakund, he spoke like that. He said, you should know that such a thing exists. So that's relevant for us, even if we can't understand it all the way. And I love your picture of the cows. That makes me happy seeing that, Rajaman. I'm just seeing you here. We'll be missing you. We're going to Ukraine next week. We'll be thinking about you.
Oh, I would like to, but I explain you why I can't. And also, you know, my how much I love the crowds also.
Yeah, It's okay. We're always happy to see you, Bhajapanit. Hare Krishna. Let's see, who else is here right now? Bana Bihari, do you want to share something?
Hi, Krishna. I don't have much to share today, but I'm just so grateful to be back. I think it's been over a month, and it's so sweet to be here again, and there are more devotees here. Nice reflections, so thank you.
Yeah, today we're speaking about association and how the association makes Nabadwip, the association makes Vrindavan, the association makes Jagannath Puri. It makes our life. And having the sanghas, when we come together and we hear and chant about Krishna with like-minded devotees about subject matters that we find interesting and appealing to the heart, it really creates a sangha. It's a very, very important thing. And so we're really glad you're here, Bana. Thank you very much. Ujjwala, do you want to share anything?
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Thank you for doing these kathas. And yeah, it's so nice to be back here after so much time. It's been a whir of things happening every weekend, but I'm happy to just sit down and hear about
I heard you guys went to Arizona and they tried to force you to become Republicans or something.
it. Was crazy, yeah. It was a fantastic trip. It was so nice to be out there. I really appreciated this point that you brought up in the beginning when you told your story with Indra Prabhu. And it was just bringing up to me, you touched on it a little bit with Vrindasundari's comment, but just how important it is to have a respect for the multiplicity of opinions that other Vaishnavas have and the viewpoints, and how that can be very challenging at times. But actually the phrase that comes to mind for me is that there's right and there's love, and that there's something kind of deeper there in the respect of another Vaishnava's kind of viewpoints, but then juxtaposing that with the necessity of having some stability, kind of as you were saying, in my own, what I've been given and my own understanding. And how, to me, it seems like it's kind of the cross point, or really the crucible of maturity in spiritual life, the ability to have my own outlook and disposition based on what I've been given, and the ability to exist harmoniously around other viewpoints, because there will be so many. And I was really appreciating that point. There were other things as well. It's hard to tack one down.
That's a really very beautiful thing. And there's a famous verse, Bhayam Vidya Benivesita Shat, which speaks about how fear arises when we see duality. And in duality comes upadhis, or designations. And we're constantly afraid. And that's a symptom of these designations. And part of the problem is that wherever we go, we have a social identity. One philosopher once said that we have three masks that we wear. We have one that we show the world with three faces, and we have another one we show our intimate friends. And then we have another one which we only show to ourselves. We have these three different faces. The problem comes when we associate with groups, a title comes. So, it's like I was just teasing on the Piney indirectly, that Arizona means Republicans, right? Something. I mean, who cares? But as devotees, we don't care about it. We're just making a joke. But some people really identify, as you well know, with the Republican Party, or I'm a mega person, I'm a Trump follower, or this or that, I'm a liberal, and we have these identities. And then other people, they use those. So they saw you at a Trump rally and they say, you're a Trumpster, you're a mega follower, and they give a title to you. And what happens, because we're always going through an existential crisis. Philosophers think that it's just a one-time thing only, or a rare thing, but it's actually something that goes throughout our whole life. We're trying to figure out who we are. And we adopt the identity that we've been told. You're a student. You're a rascal. You didn't shave. You must be a Gaudiya Math devotee. Once I was in Vrindavan doing Kartik, and I wasn't shaving for the whole month doing the Kartik. And I was happening walking past the guest reception, and somebody was trying to find a Gaudiya Mutt temple. And they were talking to the receptionist, and the Mataji at the reception, she had no idea. She's an ISKCON devotee. She doesn't know any Gaudiya Mutt temples. And all of a sudden she sees me walking by, and she says, "Oh, ask him. He'll know." Why did she point to me? Because I had a beard. I had if you have a beard, you must be a Gaudiya Mutt devotee, and so we have these designations that we have like that. And those designations make us really mental and make us miserable in our life. So when we're coming, the first thing is we have to accept Guru. And Guru tells us, you do this service. And that's my identification. I'm a servant of my Gurudev. That's my primary identification. My secondary identification is he told me to clean the toilets, or he told me to distribute books, or he told me to write books or give classes. That's a secondary identification because it may change. Gurudev tells me to give classes now, and next week he comes and says, really what I want you to do is to clean the toilets. And if our primary identification is there, we don't even hesitate. That's great. It's wonderful. But if we're thinking in an external way, no, I have this social identity. I'm the guy who gives the classes. I'm a preacher. I have this identification with the institution. Then we feel some anxiety. Well, Gurudev, I can't go clean the toilets. Nobody's going to respect me. But if my primary identification is there, that I'm just Gurudev's servant, I'm Krishna's servant, and I'll do anything that they give me, then everything is okay. And then we feel confident. And so many people may come to us, just like the senior devotee was trying to give me some honorary title kind of thing and some honorary service in the society. And that's nice. And I really respected and I appreciated his love and his honor to me and his respect and trust in me. But it's not, I didn't feel like it's coming from my guru. And it's okay. It's nice. Once, I'll give you another example. We were with my Guru Maharaj once in Berkeley, California, and the devotees liked him so much that they said, Maharaj, why don't you become the GBC here? Now, wouldn't you like that? Ujjwala Prabhu, if you visit some other, no. You can become the GBC of Berkeley, California. Oh my God. A lot of us would feel, well, I can. I'm glad you finally somebody recognized me for what I am, right? Maharaj immediately refused. No. The only reason he said I became a GBC is because my Guru Maharaj wanted me to develop the Bhubaneswar project. Mm-hmm. I became a GBC member just of that project, just so that I can run that project because that's anukul, that's favorable for my service to my Gurudev. My identifications with my Guru, my identifications not with this favor and this position that someone else is offering me. I learned a lesson from him that day.
I very much appreciate that, Prabhu. I want to reflect on that just so that I catch the point nicely, that we are, in order to really make anything else successful in our life, we have to find, I'll use the word persona here because it's been one that's coming up for me as I've been studying. I've been looking into Jungian psychology a little bit because I find it really interesting as a kind of a map for human experience. But we're all adopting these various personas, and so we need to sort out the root persona, so to speak, the one that's going to be the most stable, and ideally, as we're looking at our viewpoint, like completely stable, and that being our relationship with our guru. And so I'm also just wondering, it's kind of my experience, but I'm wondering if you have anything to say on this, that even as we find that in relation to our Guru Maharaj, that we still will also come to some questioning about that. And in that, I guess the thing that comes to mind the most would be the verse, Tadvidi pranipatena pariprashnena sevaya, that we'll then, in that relationship with our Guru, do that exploration that we're doing we were doing it with the external world and trying to adopt all these illusory personas, but try to kind of hone in on our persona, our real persona with our relationship with our Gurudev, and go deeper into that by the process of kind of, I don't want to say challenging, but I think there is some level of, yeah, in the right way, questioning, wondering exactly who I am, where I'm supposed to fit, what I'm supposed to do.
If you think about it, I would suggest that that's the primary reason why Srila Prabhupada, one of the primary reasons why Srila Prabhupada created ISKCON.
Mm.
So people could have some identity. I'm a member. I belong. I'm a life member. I'm an devotee. I'm a temple president. I'm a temple, this or that. I have this position. I have this particular thing, because we need some kind of identity. But we should also understand that those identities are not eternal. I have this identity as a servant of my Gurudev. That's an eternal identity. But I don't know my Swarup. I haven't realized that thing. I haven't realized my Sthayi Bhav, what my particular rasa is. I haven't realized my Gurudev's Swarup. And so until that comes, there's still going to be some little bit of doubt there too. Because I'll be serving my Gurudev, but if I don't understand his Swarup, then what does he really want? If I can't really understand exactly what he wants until I understand his Swarup. Of course, we want to come closer to Gurudev. We want to have a deeper understanding of our identity as a servant of Gurudev. That's our whole purpose. We want to understand the mood of Srila Prabhupada. We want to please Prabhupada. So our persona is we're members of ISKCON, we're servants of ISKCON, and that's very helpful for us. It's purifying. But as long as we have this ditya, this duality, we see something separate from Krishna. We see these are Gaudiya Math devotees, they've got a beard. These are ISKCON devotees. This is some woman, she wants to be a female Diksha Guru. But we're traditional devotees. We're Republicans. We're Democrats. As long as we see anything separate from Krishna, and we don't see that, as long as we don't understand that Krishna's in charge of the Republicans, Krishna's in charge of the Democrats, in charge of the Lady Diksha Gurus, in charge of the anti-Lady Diksha Gurus, in charge of everybody. He's doing everything. And if I see any distinction, any difference, then fear arises. And that causes problems in my relationships. And I don't know, I have doubts. Am I doing the right thing? Is it appropriate what I'm doing? So that we have to become firmly fixed. We had to become Guru Nishta. And the Guru Nishta comes when we have some faith in our Guru and we have some understanding of what service I've gotten. It's a blessing. We get a particular service and instruction from Guru. That's a great blessing. Because now I have confidence. My Gurudev trusted me. He told me to do a particular service, so I'm empowered for that. And I can be confident. Okay?
Thank you, Prabhu.
Thank you. It's nice points. I think we should keep going. Krishna Balaram Prabhu, do you want to share anything?
Hey, Krishna Prabhu, I just want to say thank you so much for class. It was really nice. I think the devotees spoke a lot of what I was thinking. So thank you, Prabhu.
Thank you, Prabhu. It's always nice to have you here. I really appreciate it. We're looking forward to seeing your Guru Maharaj next week. They're going to send a bus here to Budapest, and we'll be going with him and Trivikram Maharaj and Naranjan Maharaj and a few other devotees. They'll be taking us to Ukraine. Western Ukraine, don't be nervous for your Guru Maharaj. It's in the Karpatya Mountains. I don't think, unless Russia wants to bomb some trees and rocks, there's no reason for them to shoot any missiles or anything there. But the devotees already, they've made Naranjan Maharaj is showing me today a video that someone sent him of the pandal that they're making so they can dance. It's a big, big thing for the devotees to be able to come together and to be able to hear and just be a Hare Krishna devotee. And not, Naranjan Maharaj was telling me about devotees. One of our friends, he sleeps, he goes to his apartment building, but he doesn't sleep in the apartment because there's so much shrapnel, so many bombs coming every night. Sometimes it's dangerous by the window. So he sleeps in the hallway with his family of the apartment building. And the devotees in Ukraine, so many of them, they're not sleeping. Maybe they sleep, 1 or 2, 3 hours a night, hardly, because of just missiles and things going. And so for them to be able to go there and have some Krishna Katha for them and have some Kirtan for them, it means a lot to those devotees. As I mentioned before, we were there for Govardhan Puja last year, and the devotees were crying. It was really, really sweet. Thank you, Prabhuji. I just noticed on a pioneer your note, you have some question you're saying?
Yeah, I had a question from Ekata, but I really enjoyed the comments of the devotees, which are making more discussions on the topic. My question actually is, in the beginning of Kata, you were mentioning this Gaudiya Odia Milan festival, and I was wondering, is it coming from Mahaprabhu's time, or it was started before, or it's only started to be during when he came to Puri?
As far as I understand, well, at the time of Mahaprabhu, there was a festival every year. That's when it started. I'm not aware of it taking place before then. It's possible because the Gaudiya devotees were coming every year to Jagannath Puri, and some of them were no doubt friends. But everyone's coming together because of Mahaprabhu. Just like in ISKCON, we all come together because of Srila Prabhupada. And even though someone may be from St. Petersburg and they're like one of those crazy, nasty Russian people, who are demons, we still put up with them. And someone else is American, someone else is from South Africa. And there's so many, we love each other because we're following Srila Prabhupada. And we're coming together for that. So was that helpful?
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Mukunda Prabhu, you want to share something? That you were giving class today?
Krishna Prabhu. I tried, dismally though. I picked up two things. You spoke about the associates of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. They are constituents of himself. So I was thinking of a verse that actually describes these constituents nicely, and the verse is Panchatatvakam Krishna. Bhakta Rupa Sarupakam, Bhakta Avataram Bhaktikyam, Amami Bhakti Shaktikam. I was just thinking of that particular verse because it describes expansion of a devotee, incarnation of a devotee, pure devotee, and devotional energy of a devotee. So I was just focusing on that. And also you mentioned that the associates that were involved in the Gambhira Lila, they did not go to Vrindavan. But if I can recall, Raghunath Das Goswami was also part of the Gambhira Lila, but he ended up in Vraj.
So was
Maybe if you can explain why? Yes.
So was Sanatana Goswami, so was Rupa Goswami. And Jagadananda Pandit went to Vrindavan. There's mention of him there. It's not that none of the devotees went to Vrindavan, but the point I see in that purport is it's such an astonishing thing that here's some of these very important devotees like Gadadhar Pandit, like Sikhi Mahiti, like Sri Damodar and Roy Ramananda, and there's no record of them ever going to Vrindavan. So that's very significant for a number of reasons, one of which is that Jagannath Puri is Gupta Vrindavan. And they're in Vrindavan by their association with Chaitanya Mahaprabhu.
Okay, yeah, that's good. Thanks for.
Thank you very much for this.
Hare Krishna.
Okay, anybody else have anything? Otherwise, we'll go ahead and stop. We've gone a little over time. It's so nice to have everybody here together. I really appreciate everybody's honor. Piney, Prana Hari Prabhu, you guys, you have great comments. I really, really appreciate it very much.
I'm enjoying so much hearing others, and Yokada Prabhu, it's really, really bringing life back. Thank you so much.
Brajabanita, we like your association too. You're always a rebel, and it's really good. We need also rebels. We need people to stand up and say, "Hey, the king doesn't have any clothes on."
Yeah, but you know how it's heavy for me to hear fanatic things. It's just unnatural. Everything that it's unnatural, I cannot accept. That it's artificial. Something. Look, most of my life I'm dealing with artificial things, so I'm seeing it from the 100 miles. So I don't need it in my spirit life either. You understand?
But,
So
you know,
what for?
one astonishing thing is that for some people, you're the fanatic. For some people, I'm the fanatic, or Anapayani is the fanatic. And if we can come together, and maybe we don't, Anapayani is too much of a fanatic. We don't want to like be around her, maybe, but still, we can appreciate that she has her thing, and I have my thing also, and we can learn something from each other. It's good. We can even learn from cats, Bhajabani.
Yes, and it from dogs too.
Yes, and cows as well. There's some different personalities. All right. So thank you all very much. It's really great to see you guys. Let me just say something. Next week, unless something changes, we're not going to be here next week. We're going to be in Ukraine, and I'm just going to be giving myself whatever I've got to those devotees there.
Oh, my heart gonna be with you. Just my praise for this holy land, for those holy people there. Just I'm just my heart with them, really. And if I could physically, if I was younger, if I were younger, I could, or if I were there, I'm sure that I was taking some active part in this war, because it's really war with demons.
Okay. Thank you, Bhajabani. Thank you, Albi. So I'll stay in touch and let everybody know when our next session is, but I don't think it's going to be next Sunday. I'm not 100% sure of that, but by next Friday, I'll be able to say for sure. Okay. Srila Prabhupada ki, Samaveda Bhakta ki, Gopremanandi Hari Bol, Vanchakopadarubhascha, Shantavecha, Titanam Pavanebhyo.